Hello, my name is Maciej and Jan, and this is the first episode of my podcast, which I would like to be a mixture of opinions on technology's impact on our both social and economic lives. And my goal is to invite technology thought leaders in various areas, which I meet during my daily career as an executive headhunter for technology area. So let me introduce my guest today. My guest is Jan Przybyło. Jan is a seasoned CTO, having experience in differentiated environments, having experience both in startups and in big tech. Also, as a European, working intensively with US startups and introducing US startups to Europe. And above all, Jan is absolutely passionate about Agile, about managing teams, and about let's say, I once heard a motto that many IT problems are not solved in the IT area, but in people's area, in culture area. So I'm very pleased to have Jan today. And maybe I would start our discussion, because we've had a couple of discussions before on the topics we cover today. Is CTO dead? Because is the role of CTO dead? Because some say it's dead, some say it's not dead, like punk's not dead, for instance. Punk used to be dead as a genre of music, though. My older daughter now, loves Sex Pistols and the like. So in the world of Agile, in the world of turquoise organization, is CTO dead?
Thank you, Maciej, for such a warm welcome and introduction. Yeah, as you mentioned, we had multiple very passionate talks about the world of IT from that exact angle that you mentioned. It just turns out, I'm not sure how recent of a finding that is, that software developers and IT talent, they are actually human beings too. So let's get back to it. The question you asked is actually fairly interesting, because you mentioned CTO, but I would really actually boil it down to how we understand the relationship between development department, engineering department, technology organization in general, versus organization overall, so-called business. Usually, in a way, the bridge between this team, development team, and so-called C-suite is a CTO, CIO, CDO, or VP of Engineering, Director of IT, and so on. Let's say that. Do we need that bridge nowadays in the Agile era? We need, not just for my own interest, but I wondered what's exactly the role of VP of Engineering previously, Managing Director, and what kind of play these how are these roles consistent? Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear it. So something is breaking down, but let's continue.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I will continue. So let's look at it from one example angle. We have this kind of communication gap. When you get into a party, integration party for a particular team, if you get into a party with marketing team, you will have some fun, that's for sure. If you get into a party with the development team, well, they will definitely make you learn something. Let's put it this way. So there is a different way of communicating. Obviously, as developers, we need to maintain focus for very long periods of time, and that impacts the way we function overall. So communication-wise, there's this kind of bridge, and it's kind of a split of attention and split of how we function as IT managers. In one hand, sometimes we feel like a fraud because we don't code anymore. Because we don't deliver. We get paid not based off lines of code. So that's funny for a new manager who just started being involved in that kind of role. On the other side, we quite often feel uncomfortable with the C-suite, where they speak their language in quotes, and we don't fit into that environment. So in that way, it's difficult, but patching that bridge, I believe, is greatly beneficial, definitely to the company, but from my point of view, very importantly to the development team. Suddenly, our mission, the way we operate, can be understood by the more broad organization. It's not just that software that we make, services that we provide are needed, but actually people understand why we do that, what are the struggles and hurdles, and so on. I also want to bring one more example, and that's related to Agile. Agile, in kind of a beautiful synthetic way, let me say that, is about teams that are fully self-managing. In a way, we have a Scrum Master who addresses some of communication, some of relationships. In a way, we have the product owner who is responsible for the purpose. What are we supposed to do? But it's not essentially a part of the Scrum setup or Agile setup that through these means, development teams continue to stay motivated, engaged, and with full understanding why they do what they do. And the belief that I built over these couple of years is that human communication still stands. And I remember even though it was Steve Ballmer kind of breaking the news to what I remember to the whole organization, it still felt specific way to be able to see on that recording, and kind of feel the connection with the guy. On the flip side, if you wanted to have a situation that is fully automated, we have teams that are fully manageable, self-managing. We get them into a room. We get them into an all hands company meeting. Someone is ringing at my door, but let's put that aside. We have a challenge coming up. We have some tough times in the company, and if we were to use a big screen and project a PowerPoint presentation that just shows, well, we're facing these struggles, and we need to especially pay dedication to this area and that area, and no person standing on that stage, I wouldn't feel emotionally engaged. I wouldn't feel like, yeah, I'm gonna take on that struggle and I'm gonna do my best. I need a person there. On the other hand, we go through that, we manage to pull the best out of that situation. We want to reward, let's say, the best team, the team that have done the best job. If we arrange it in a way where we have all hands meeting, and we have a presentation showing, yeah, it's this team, and no one says so. No one is there to hand the prize to these guys. We also don't feel like we've done it, for a reason. And my point is that, if company gets acquired, everyone, I believe most people need a reason to stay.
Yeah, you mentioned that before.
Yeah.
That, let's say,
exactly.
loyal team is acquisition ready.
Especially if it's a big surprise, and especially if it's potentially not exactly
You've
a
come to the
positive
process.
change. Yeah. Yeah, I've been involved in those kinds of situations. Actually, been involved on the acquired side 4 times, and one side on the side of a company that made an acquisition. So it's a tough world, that's for sure. And we need a person who we can trust and stay loyal to. As simple as that. I'm not going to stay in the company because I feel loyalty to the logo or to the brand or to the company, or I like the office. Come on, nowadays, yeah, every office.
Nobody cares really.
Yeah, exactly. So that's how I feel, and in that sense, for me, it is very much about knowing what guys do, what they go through, personally. If they have some problems, they have problems sleeping. Practical example. I want to know about that. I don't want to control that situation. I can't control that situation, but I want to know about it and know what the guys are going through. So that's how I see that. Now, whether we call it CTO, CIO, CDO, I think it does matter. We want to speak a common language. When we interface with a third party, with different company, it does matter whether we introduce our CIO or CTO or CDO to them, or VP of engineering. They right away know what it indicates. It does matter. But at the same time, internally, every company understands CIO or CTO scope of responsibility slightly differently. So that's how.
And we discussed this very brilliant book called A Seat at the Table by Mark Schwartz, and there is a very good point made there that we also discussed before in our conversation. Does CTO, CIO, CDO shall be responsible for, or shall be assessed, judged upon securing profit? Because the point is that, let's say, this was the approach, say, in the 90s, in early 2000s, that the chief person responsible for IT in an enterprise is to bring money to the company. And the modern approach, which is in this great book, is that we shouldn't really talk about the money. I mean, at the end of the day, company has to have a profit. But a chief technical person in a company, the larger the more, in my opinion, is responsible to manage volatility IT brings, because the world of IT is extremely volatile and extremely, generating many risks. Today, one technology might be, top of the pops. In half a year, nobody remembers about it. In the meantime, we may, invest heavily in all that. So the more agile a chief technical person is, the smaller steps she or he undertakes, the better is this technology risk management. So what's your opinion on it?
Well, let's start off with the revenue aspect. In a way, I understand that, especially as we look at the scope of responsibilities of CDO, when there's a market to be potentially highly digitalized, that is not digitalized now. And I'm speaking from a healthcare perspective. There's a lot that can be done here.
Yeah, you've been into healthcare a lot.
Yes, I spent 8 years at one company involved in creation of software for genetics, progeny, and now I'm a CTO of FamGenix. So what we do is we reduce couple of steps really in this communication between the patient and genetic counselor. If you actually wanted to get together with genetic counselor and look at your health from that perspective, it would take a couple of steps. We really, with FamGenix, we bring it to the patient. Everyone can download this app and enter their data, possibly in fully anonymized way, no problem here. And and generate their risk scores right away. Now, depending on the level that is indicated, you might want to get with geneticist or genetic counselor to further inspect what's your genetic background and what kind of risks for hereditary cancer do you carry. So we skip really a couple of steps here. And I'm not talking about skipping steps in terms of sacrificing quality, but pure communication. You don't have to be referred by your doctor, by your physician, to a specialist, and then the specialist decides whether they should start collecting your data and run a risk algorithm on your data, but you just get it right away. So that's getting back to the topic. That's the area, that's the market, healthcare, that can be highly digitalized. Not every market is like that. I know that our agriculture in many ways still is. So here I fully understand that. But on the flip side, if we, as you mentioned, the 90s, if we obligate a CTO to be, solely responsible for continuous growth of the company, financial growth of the company, it's not exactly realistic. And I would compare it to continuous growth of capacity or velocity of an agile team. The funny and unrealistic kind of promise of agile is that, well, if we put agile on top of specific team, this team will continue to grow indefinitely. So that is not realistic. How it really works, and we shouldn't, as agile professionals, we shouldn't push forward those types of claims that the capacity will continue to grow without any constraints. The reality of it is that every team can get to a certain highly saturated performance, let me put it this way. When we look at the chart showing us how velocity of this team continues to grow, this chart flattens. There's a saturation to it. At that point, it's a very good team, very highly optimized team. At the same time, very fragile team. And it's very easy to break this kind of setup. And we shouldn't look at this kind of state where there's a team that is highly optimal. They know each other, they know the product, they know how they roll. We shouldn't look at it like, the situation that can be further improved from performance standpoint. We should, really make an effort to identify the success that happened here, and at the same time do our best to continue to maintain this very good team. Let me give you a practical example of what happened in one company. That's not from my experience, but from my early on Scrum coach. One company had this kind of team that was running very optimally. They didn't get a lot of recognition, but they really have done a lot of stuff. Their throughput was just amazing. And suddenly some VP came up with a brilliant idea to start tinkling with financial aspects and bring some calculated bonus dependent on how things went and so on. In a couple of cases, it will not be beneficial to that development team. And it was a terrible kick in their motivation, and the velocity went down right away. Not because they decided to, sacrifice the velocity. It's just the nature of things. So no one really recognized that this team is going really is working in a really optimal way. In that sense, let's be realistic. Let's not have these kind of funny ideas that CTO, CIO is solely responsible for the revenue. Also depends. Let me add one last thought. It's probably a topic that I overthought slightly, but it also depends on whether the company is a company where the product is highly dependent or actually created by that engineering team. If we're talking about manufacturing facility that does something, that we have an IT department there, It's great. They can optimize a couple of things, but at the same time, it's a side service. This kind of IT department is on the side and it provides services to the main organization. So I believe things are a bit differently structured when a CTO is actually responsible for creation of software, because that's the software this company is selling.
Right. And you know, CDO versus CTO, you know, we talked about this as well. Because at one point, let's say CIO is for me someone that takes care of general infrastructure. And this is, let's say, where all these positions come from historically. My late father-in-law was an electronics engineer, but then he was, let's say, in Poland of 1970s, he was perceived as an IT guy. And my wife recently found some photo of him, and he had this, you know, white, I don't know how it's in English, cloak over his clothes, like doctors wear. So these guys were, let's say, guys who in white doctor cloaks, because they were, you know, considered engineers who were in a laboratory.
Yes.
And it's a funny picture to have in mind, because it wasn't perceived as a crucial role. It was some strange guy in this white thing. Yeah, he does something with the machines, but that's it. So then, let's say, when we, you know, started into software era, a company needed a person who's, let's say, responsible for software development. Of course, it doesn't relate to maybe large or to lesser extent relates to large enterprises who do not produce software, but for instance anything like, I don't know, coffee or cars or whatever. But at the point, I think that even to communicate with external vendor, a high qualified software development person is needed. But then it all came to the point that, let's say, all the CIO, CTO person is very technical person and doesn't have a large overview. So business and corporates created a position of a CDO, Chief Digital Officer. So it's somebody not only technical, but overseeing the whole digitization of an enterprise.
Yeah.
And I remember some 7-8 years ago, it was, let's say, CTO, CIO is dead. Now we have CDOs, and some of these people were not technical, actually. And now I see a reverse. I have quite a few approaches from experienced CDOs with some technical background or with technical origin, engineering origin, but some 20 years ago. And they were, you know, business people. I don't want to joke that they were PowerPoint people, but yes, let me have some humor. That were, you know, creating business models. They were responsible for communication with the whole of enterprise. And now it seems to be in reverse, you know, like after COVID, in this, let's say, volatile times with the war in Ukraine and so on, and with threats with US, China, trade war, and 100 other factors, large enterprises became down to earth. So what's your take on that?
Well, as I mentioned, there's a lot of space for a CDO to make some impact. You know, when I think about the CDO role in general, whether we think about what it meant 10 years ago or what's the standing of this role now, I believe there's a lot of opportunity for a CDO, you know, putting aside how it functions currently on the business side, how it's understood now, because this kind of person should have a free pass into multiple
Agree.
parts of the organization, and have kind of an open ticket to look at things, to optimize, see what can be further digitalized, what kind of tools can we use here, and so on. Obviously, it also poses a risk. If we give financial audit this kind of ability to inspect every part of the company, so obviously some communication malfunctions can occur. If we give the growth department this kind of a free pass, it can also cause some conflicts and misunderstandings. And same goes for any other type of specialty, like quality, not quality assurance, but quality overall. For example, in the context of ISO certification, if you can enter every room, you can enter every department, talk with anyone, why they're doing it this way, it can spin some conflict, to be completely honest. But at the same time, one more example that pops in my head is Raja Taneja.
Right.
He's a person who spent, I believe, like 15 years, something like that, at Microsoft. That was the moment when Ciao, the company that I worked for as a developer, has been acquired by Microsoft, and he was responsible for taking us through this acquisition process. A very interesting person, an impressive leader, let me put it this way. He's currently VP of technology or engineering. Sorry for not remembering that. But the person at Visa. So yeah, and actually, what comes to how he started with overall engineering was electrical engineering. He's a very savvy businessman. He's done MBA, but at the same time, I looked at his past some time ago, and he was not a developer. He was not a network administrator. He wasn't a DevOps engineer, and in that sense, it seemed like a mismatch. But at the same time, if it's a person who is, equipped the right way to different initiatives with different sides of the business, it can work really well. So in that sense, necessarily think that CDO, it needs to be a person, be like software development or computer science and so on. Another example that I have for you is our VP of product, Jamie LaRue, generic certified extremely proficient over these years and became a CTO of Progeny for a couple of years, which is solely a software business. So I have these examples for you. So I think it can work.
Right. Something is breaking down over the internet, but let's continue. You have experience working as a European person, working mostly with US companies. Are there any differences in your opinion? It's, let's say, how the software development process is managed on both sides of the pond?
There are differences between how development process is approached, West Coast versus East Coast of the US, even, right?
Right. So we are also curious about it.
Yeah, even more so when it comes to US versus Europe.
Any examples that would be?
Yeah, I started thinking about whether techniques are more important or mindset. I think mindset or culture of work is highly different. Let me put it this way. We have, for example, in Poland, but I would think we can also, to a certain extent, abstract it to Europe. We have certain experiences, certain history, what European nations went through, and it impacts, you know, our approach and kind of a shape that our work ethics takes. In the US, the approach is slightly different, and let me give you an example, a really honest one. Being 38 years old, sometimes I got to, in quotes, manage, try to help really developers, technical people who are much older than me. People who are US citizens, they can be proud of that, and have probably easier way of finding themselves in the technology market, again being located in the US. And I work with them, and there's a certain work ethic that is different than in Poland, I believe, also than in Europe. It's a job, you get to that job, and you know, you try to do your best, work hard, play hard, however you want to call it, but there's a certain piece to it. I believe to a certain extent in Poland we are kind of used to not finding the right balance between personal and work life, but really slightly sacrificing work life and sacrificing personal life, getting things somewhat mixed up, and projecting these emotions to both family and work. So I really like this separation of how people think of their family, of how they invest their time when spending their time with kids, versus how focused they are on their job throughout work hours.
Yes,
that's the one that really shouts at me. It's very vivid.
yes, I would agree with that. And let's say, I know that we were to talk about, you know, the role CTO, Agile, and your experiences, but these days I think it's very hard to avoid the topic of the war in Ukraine, of the invasion on Ukraine. So let me ask you, what do you think, let's say, from Polish or European IT market, does it all mean to us?
I think it really greatly matters to everyone. I'm not even mentioning global economical aspects.
Of course, but setting this aside, let's say, let's focus solely on.
The most problematic to me is that we, not just as Europeans, but we as an IT overall, in the US, in Europe, and other countries, highly developed countries, let's say, we every now and then revisit the topic of where's the technology hub, where's that talent pool that we could approach now, because you know it's getting continuously more and more difficult to find the right talent, and you know, being completely honest, to find any talent that is available out there on the market. Recruiting developers is a very difficult task. So in that sense, Ukraine has been an amazing place for a very long time. Culturally very fit, and we can see that very vividly how they fight for their freedom. It's not a socialist approach to fight that hard. It's not a communist approach to fight that hard. I wouldn't believe some of strictly communist countries would be able, their nation would be able to fight that hard. So Ukraine is,
hopefully we have only one communist country, I guess, at the very moment, or two.
I guess it depends on the interpretation, but it's not go
Russia and North Korea.
Yeah, what comes to, you know, economics, China isn't really. But that was a great hub. I hope it will continue to be after things, you know, settle down, after they reach an agreement. But in that context, you know, we've been all looking early on at India, now at Philippines. China has been considered by you know, it's a tricky game. South
Yeah,
America,
China is very interesting in this aspect.
yes, there's a lot of talent there, but we say you never know. Leave it like that. But we continue to go on a dire need for development talent. So we have to continue. Unfortunately, that's what the situation forces us to do. Continue for new places to find the talent. Long story short, Ukraine used to be a very good place. Now, I'm not, you know, talking. I'm not speaking from perspective of whether this kind of investment in relationship with Ukrainian company, with Ukrainian vendor who will provide us with development talent, whether it's safe, whether, you know, we'll get a return on investment and so on. I'm talking really about lives of specialists. My hope is that some of them, disregarding some fringe differences in cost of living, will prefer to settle in Poland after, you know, the military aspect goes away. That's my great hope, that you know, for the effort that we presented, that for the openness of our hearts and our homes, we will be
you host refugees.
Yes,
and this is what I said, right? Because I think, yeah, that you are too modest to say that, but I will say.
Yeah, I don't want to bring it to the, you know, forefront, to the attention, because I believe it's something I do privately. But yes,
Of course,
we have a family of refugees here. In our house, it's not a side apartment that we own. No, they actually live with us. They cook with us. They amazing people. Very, very, let's say, heavily wounded people by the last couple of weeks. They've been in complete shock about what happened. Obviously, it's kids and women, because their fathers, their grandfathers, they brought situation. They don't want to watch, you know, TV and our breaking news. We know how dramatic our news TV stations might be, just to
I can't watch the news anymore, to be honest.
Yeah,
because it makes
exactly.
me too heartbroken.
Imagine being actually personally involved in this kind of situation. That must be a nightmare. But, you know, I know that they talk with their men, with their family, the other half of their family, let's say, in Ukraine, and it's just comprehension. That's what I believe. And actually, getting back to the topic of tech, years old boy, a first year, excuse me, first year student in Kiev. He's not in Kiev now. He's here now. He's a skilled, excuse me, skilled software developer. Looking for a job. I do my best to help him out to find the right fit. But that's the point. We would like people and contribute to, excuse me, to what we're doing here, and receive safety of the situation in return. I think that's a fair game.
Yes, I observe the situation. Let's say, of course, we all do watch this situation very closely, especially everybody in Poland. And some remarks very much market wise. I see that it's both Ukraine and Belarus and Russia were one huge hub for IT. I read the other day that 70,000 Russian developers fled the country. This was at TechCrunch. It's available at TechCrunch. Probably you need to Google out. The point is that the thesis of this, and I've read a similar article somewhere else in an English language press, is that these people will never come back. That this is probably the first wave of immigration from Russia, that will not be temporary. These people won't come back because they had enough, and they will not believe anymore that anything might change. I do pray that it would, but it's another big topic. And can you make Russia a democratic country or a Western attached country? I will say very bluntly, I'm very doubtful about it. Even if this regime is overthrown. So this would impact, let's say, Russian IT market very much, and it will be a substantial loss for many years to come, or for a generation. Many people, the same is happening, I guess, in Belarus, which is also a dictatorship, but probably to lesser extent. Probably they are now not as much able to get out of the country as the Russians. Or I know that Russia is blocking borders, everyone's blocking borders. Last Sunday there was you must have read it, the last train from Petersburg to Helsinki, with the last people who managed to flee. Still 85% of the Russian population supports Putin, and this is by independent poll. So it's only a minority that's escaping, but still this is the most educated and tech people above all others. And Ukraine, so there were some bombastic economic articles in the Polish press that we will gain as Polish tech on this war. I don't like these comparisons, to be honest, in such a moment. Mm-hmm. But realistically, I've had very many approaches from US and mostly US startups that had their development teams based in Ukraine. That in the first place, they would like to consider Poland as the place that they will relocate part of the Ukrainian teams and hire new people, but that they do not exclude any other location, like Asia or I don't know, any lower cost location like Bulgaria, Romania, or South America. And guess what? Out of, say, 8 approaches, no one came back in a month. So this seems like a new card tossing for many nearshore, offshore location. To be honest, this is one observation. Second observation is that, let's say, companies who have presence both in Poland and in Ukraine, and the Ukrainian teams went to the front, don't have it as easy to offer their clients their Polish teams, because the account manager stayed in Ukraine, and the account persons who were, let's say, taking care of the client. And I understood the value of account management in this very aspect. To be honest, this is something that this war also taught me in a way. So this is from my very, very technical perspective.
Yeah, a lot is changing from day to day nowadays, and let's watch it very closely. I believe, I don't want to be, going too synthetic and too raw and, drop the emotions, because it's a tough situation for very many people personally, but at the same time, so I believe there's a lot of trust is a big component, a human factor to every company. Development team. So let's to think about things in a healthy way, and if we think about transitions and getting developers' interest in a move to Poland, let's not start with economic aspects, even though it will eventually, I believe, turn out to be very, very, very beneficial to Polish companies and to our clients.
Yes, and let's say, last but not least, what do you think, let's say these days, this volatile times, about, you know, security from the CTO perspective, IT security?
Yes, well, that's a very valid question. Two things happen here. First one is the whole geopolitical game, and obviously a lot of attacks happen on the cyber level, not just physically. Even putting aside fake news, but really gaining access to someone's account can be used as a tool. There's been a really significant uptick in amount of attacks performed from different sides. It's as usually a game of and faking that it comes from China, or while the actual attacker might be somewhere else. That's just the nature of it. One thing I learned talking with another CTO colleague is that this, let me show you that this is a very powerful tool. It's a U2F key. It's not a memory stick. It looks like a pen drive or a memory stick, but it's actually just looks like that. Looks like one. It's a USB device, but it's a device that holds your private key completely secure.
Wow.
As Jack Dorsey, putting aside, you know, his current situation and the way his involvement with Twitter changes over recent months, Jack Dorsey once said that if every one of their company, their employees at Twitter had this kind of U2F key, they would prevent a lot of attack. And the attack angle was that attackers would gain access to employees' accounts and, you know, tinker with stuff. So getting this kind of signal is, I believe, fairly strong nowadays. If with SSO approach, where you can really authenticate to all of your tools, to Calamari, to Miro, and other tools that most companies use. If you can authenticate to it via Google account or via a Microsoft account or even via your Facebook, and these can be secured with U2F key, I believe it's quite powerful. You can really secure access to your accounts very well, even if you base it just on Google, Microsoft, and Facebook. Obviously, a lot of attacks happen on Facebook. I have multiple friends who mentioned during some conversations that their accounts have been stolen, and suddenly their friends started receiving messages allegedly from them that you know, I need $100 transferred to me like right now because I'm under their need, and so on. It's just ugly. It just impacts personal relationships, but it's also very unfair. So attackers use that. You can secure your account with U2F key. It's just $20. So that's that. I also think that SSO approach, or global identity providers, we could also call that kind of concept as the couple global identity providers, is a very powerful tool. It's not passwordless yet, but it's a big step towards that direction. I would say that VPN, old good VPN, is always worth a try. It's an extra step, but VPN connection established to crucial resources of the company is also a good way of securing your things. Obvious things like antivirus and all the updates installed, all the IT trainings for people to not make these simple mistakes, simple, you know, human aspect to who we trust, what messages, what SMS, what emails we trust. which ones we think are suspicious. Taking, and that's covered. That's not even related to geopolitical situation. It's just solely covered remote work. Many of us do some work and not being able to get the office over the last 2 years. We work from cafes, we work from various places, securing your stuff properly, and using some password manager instead of typing in your password. I think that's fairly obvious. There are cameras in those kinds of places, for God's sake. What else? I think, and let me know what you think.
So I think, let's say, I agree that,
yeah.
let's say, obvious stuff works. I'm not an IT security specialist. I've read quite a lot about it. Actually, I don't recruit many security specialists, but let's say, from what I read, from what I watched, from what I learned, is basics first, and training your organization second.
Yes. How about this kind of concept? Let me throw this curveball at you. How about we put accent on using a computer work just for work versus your personal computer? My point is that no one will really have a need to use work computer to get to their personal resources, to download files from their personal Google Drive, to get to Facebook, and so on and so on. If we put accent on the rule that work computer is just for work, I know it sounds ugly. Many people use that, really see that as a perk, as work benefit, having a good outcome, and said, well, nowadays a work computer is just supposed to be for work. What do you think?
I would agree. I mean, I myself have one computer for everything, and even for my 5-year-old daughter to watch Netflix from time to time on weekends. Even though I bought her a tablet, it's daddy's computer that needs to be. But I'm a small company, so it's so it would be probably difficult for me. But after 2+ years working from home, now I'm in my office, and this is not a fake. This is a real view.
You have a beautiful, that's for sure.
And thank you. So I'm very happy of this. So probably I thought that I will buy myself a desktop instead of a laptop, and probably I will have a tablet at home. Yes, this would be a good idea, because that with a desktop you're not taking work home.
Yep, that's another good thing too.
And I have a very light, very thin laptop, just to get it around. It's a little bit beaten on the side. It has 5 years already. It's beaten on the side because it was traveling with me all over Poland, on every Polish motorway, and with brakes. Sometimes it's scratch and so on. But now, seriously, a good friend of mine from childhood is a guy responsible for IT security at CERN in Geneva, this European Physics Institute. And at a point, he told me a couple of years ago, he had a project, to handle or to curb bring your own device, because IT people are so keen on, having this very set of hardware that they need, like this very laptop, this very operating system, this very model, so on and so forth. That when my friend took it over, he said, like, well, it's a bloody mess. And he put some, I don't know if I can disclose it, but he put some very hard policies.
Makes sense.
Because it was, let's say, this went to the roof. So this is from a large.
I can imagine. And nowadays, mobile devices are maybe not exactly as volatile, but and prone for attacks, but they can be used as an attack tool too. in all technologies like SMS, which is highly outdated and very easy to attack other problems, but that's a topic for the operators, for the cellular networks. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
Jan, I would like to thank you very much for this great talk.
Thank you very much too. As always, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, likewise. And I'm very happy. I was a bit, let's say, nervous. This was my first podcast, and I think that we made a very, very, very valuable talk as usual. So it will be valuable for the viewers. And so it's 5:37 in Warsaw and in Wrocław. So I wish you a great weekend and speak you sometime soon.
Wish you a great weekend too. Thank you for that opportunity to talk through these very, very interesting, very up-to-date topics, and wish you luck with the podcast. Take care.